December 18th, 2015. A day that haunts many. A long-awaited return of a decades-long franchise was upon us. But it wasn't how many people had hoped. This day would spark years-long discourse that still has people arguing to this very day. This franchise's fandom would never be the same, for better or for worse. This was a force to be reckoned with. I guess there was a new Star Wars movie that day too. I don't know, I never really watched those movies. This was kind of like the Barbenheimer of the 2010s. We're getting ahead of ourselves though. Anyway, what's happening for him? A lot can change in 10 years. 10 years ago, I was a sophomore in high school, and now I'm a grown adult. 10 years ago, I was starting to become aware that our country was falling into fascism, and now we're kind of there. Some things don't change, though. 10 years ago, I loved Precure. Now, I love Precure. 10 years ago, I started getting really nosy about the toy and entertainment licensing industry, and now I still am. The biggest difference is that I'm actually kind of involved in some way. Not as a day job, I'm just a frequent press badge holder. Anyway, some of you may be wondering right now, what the heck is Precure? Because contrary to popular belief, a lot of the people that have a vague memory of Glitter Force did not actively seek out the rest of the franchise. The best way I could describe it is like, you know Power Rangers, right? It was originally a Japanese series called Super Sentai, and the company that made Super Sentai has this girl equivalent that's called Precure, or Pretty Cure if you want to use your full legal. It's this magical girl anime that started all the way back in 2004, and it still runs to this very day. It's a meta-series, meaning each season is self-contained, though the more popular ones will occasionally get sequels. Each season focuses on a team of heroines with a different motif fighting a monster of the week. The average American millennial might instantly start pointing fingers at Sailor Moon, but the concept of a magical girl was around internationally for decades prior to that. Plus, this is from the same exact studio that brought us Sailor Moon. I'm just saying, if like Goku, Naruto, Deku, and all those other battle shonen are allowed to coexist, I don't see why there's any issue with Usagi Tsukino passing her baton. This series is also known for heavy action, which I know is a very controversial thing to say. The earlier seasons featured veteran animators who worked on Dragon Ball Z. The original producer, Takashi Washio, once stated that the original concept came from the idea, sometimes girls want to go a little berserk too, the same way little boys do. And I think we should let them. And I can tell you, as someone who was once a little girl, he's entirely right in that statement. Also, a big message of this is that your desire to go berserk should come from the love you have for others and your desire to protect them. They did an entire movie about that. That was the thesis of the movie, by the way. In the past 10 years, I have witnessed a lot. We went from having no legal way to watch most of Precure to having much of the series now officially available on Crunchyroll. Except for a few seasons that are still missing. We were even able to now officially watch the English dub of Futari wa Precure, which was produced in 2009 and aired in Canada and the UK, but never released into the US until freaking 2025. This, of course, is not the first Precure dub we've received in the US. We had a certain Netflix exclusive until somewhat recently. I'm not here to go over the actual content and changes of Glitter Force in detail. Mostly because if I try to, this video is gonna get a copyright strike. If you haven't seen it before, The best way I could describe it is like a time capsule. While by the later 2010s, a lot of children's anime dubs were starting to move away from the practices of the 90s and the 2000s, Glitter Force decided not to shed that Americanized filter many of them were forced to wear. Glitter Force was like a dub straight from 2001 coming out in 2015, which maybe it wasn't that strange, but then continued all the way to 2018. I don't want to talk about what it is, I want to talk about why it is the way it is, and how it even became to exist the way it is. And for that, we're gonna have to go all the way back to the beginning. Not just the beginning of Precure, but the beginning of magical girl anime dubs in general. This is gonna be an incredibly abridged history to warm us up. I'm like giving you the spark notes right now. And trust me, once we're all done and you start thinking about the bigger picture, you're gonna understand why I took you on this ride. Precure is considered part of the magical girl genre, as we previously stated. It's one of those hyper-specific genres that nerds like to get really into. The magical girl genre has had a rocky history with the United States. We could see this all the way back to the 80s. Several attempts to bring magical girl anime stateside fell through outside of a few home video releases. Even homegrown shows like She-Ra struggled significantly.
The problem that we ran into was that in the aftermath of the public approbation against the violence of He-Man, the consultants really came after us hard on She-Ra, to the point where they said, if she's a female character, should not be fighting. A female character should not be using a sword. The male characters, like Bo, they could use swords, they could fire things, they hit people. But She-Ra, they said, rather than punching someone, she would do a ballet-style kick and almost by accident hit somebody. And she never used a sword to hurt someone. And it was all latent misogyny and sexism, that we cannot have a female character acting in this strong fashion.
There was people in the company and focus groups and what have you that were just absolutely terrified of the concept of a woman holding a sword. And it was hard to argue with that kind of feedback. It would take a juggernaut in the 90s to shift things. In theory.
In 1969, the first man stepped on the moon, and history was made. Now, get ready to make history again. Blast off with the most powerful series in 25 years, Sailor Moon. She took Japan by storm, and now she's coming here, Sailor Moon.
Sailor Moon premiered in the US in 1995. About 3 years after the original Japanese release. And a show this internationally beloved that's still a mainstay of Hot Topics to this day? It flopped! Hard! Sure, while the YTV airings in Canada were doing pretty well, the US was airing it in syndication, meaning it would air on a variety of different local channels throughout the country. These channels tended to schedule it way earlier than the average child would be up. And so, just as Season 2 had wrapped up production, Sailor Moon was cancelled. It wouldn't stay this way, though. This was a time period where fan petitions actually meant something. 12,500 people rallied together and told them they need to actually air the show normally. They were also buying Pop-Tarts because Kellogg's was sponsoring it, and they figured, oh, if the sponsors are getting money, then they're going to say, hey, you guys need to air this show. I mean, it worked. Maybe not the Pop-Tart part, but it still was successful. Despite how the powers that be tried to insist that it wasn't actually worth it, Sailor Moon made its way back to TV. It eventually found its way on Toonami, where it was able to air 2 additional seasons. But it was still cancelled again by the time the final series, Stars, was about to be dubbed. Sailor Stars would not receive an English dub until 2019. This actually had nothing to do with rating or toy sales. This was more of an internal conflict between Toei Animation and the creator Naoko Takeuchi over, general international rights disputes. So, by, no means did this mean Sailor Moon was flopping again. This was just issues that was outside of their own hands. They were even already making toy prototypes for the final season, so I would say it was doing pretty well. People did not have faith in anime for girls and would say, "Told you so," every time the industry set one up from the beginning to fail. Cardcaptor Sakura would be the next notable one to be released. There was so little faith in this one, they actually tried to initially market it as a boys' action series. They tried to market this as a show for boys.
Now, Lee and Sakura must capture them and use the forces of good to conquer the forces of evil. Prepare for a quest unlike any you've seen before. Prepare for Card Captors, coming in June on Kids WB.
And they would often try to position Sakura's rival Lee as the main character. Obviously, they gave up on this after a while because they realized there was no way they were going to make that work. Again, while it initially failed, fan support helped the series persist to this day and later get more faithful releases. Cardcaptor Sakura is a series by the artist group Clamp, whose other series, Magic Knight Ray-Earth, actually almost aired on Fox Kids in the 90s.
Into a mystical, magical world to fight for what is right. 3 young girls together alone, the spirit of the Magic Knight.
This broadcast never materialized, and the series would later be released on home video. The next one in the timeline is a little tricky to pinpoint. While Bandai and Toei were trying to release Magical Do-Re-Mi starting back in 2000, it did not get a release until 2005 by 4Kids. The series had already ended in Japan at this point, and its successor, Precure, was already in its second season. Before 4Kids released Do-Re-Mi, they released Mew Mew Power.
Kiki, Karina, Bridget, Renee, and Zoe. 5 teens, protecting the world and making it a safer place for dating. It's the all-new Mew Mew Power, premiering next week at 8 a.m.
Mew Mew Power was the English dub of Tokyo Mew Mew, which released a few months prior to Do-Re-Mi in early 2005. It aired 3 years after the premiere of Tokyo Mew Mew. This show was actually pretty successful in the airings. Despite being one of 4Kids' most successful shows at the time, it was dropped from the schedule before it could even finish airing the 26 dubbed episodes. There was only 26 episodes dubbed out of Tokyo Mew Mew's original 52 episode run, by the way. After episode 23, it just vanished. Why? The one big issue besides TV ratings is toy sales. For much of the children's entertainment market, toy and merchandise sales make up a huge part of the revenue. Nobody wanted to make Mew Mew Power toys. There's a long-standing belief in the industry that girls just don't buy toys. There's barely any merit to this belief, but you could see similar statements from executives from across the decades. I can't find exact numbers, but we could assume Card Captors didn't do super well in the toy aisle. I own some of the dolls. They all came in box, and almost all of them had a KB Toy sticker on them, which is a now defunct discount toy retailer. Sailor Moon, while it did change companies midway through, did manage to stay on store shelves for around 6 years. That's a pretty respectable amount of time for any brand. That's actually longer than the original release of Monster High's first generation, and that's considered one of the most popular toy brands of the 2010s. Winx Club was also doing really well at the time, and that was airing on 4Kids alongside Mew Mew Power. They were still afraid to give anything similar a chance though, and it could have been because of the other magical girl anime they were airing at the time.
At the Do-Re-Mi Magic Shop, magic's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Be sure to catch the premiere of Magical Do-Re-Mi next week.
I was around in this era. Very young, mind you, but I remember what it was like, and what I'm about to tell you is probably going to sound very familiar. I do not remember seeing a single ad for these on TV.
Magical Do-Re-Mi. You could be a witchling too. Just twirl your light up wanderer with magical sounds and spell drops. Or make your own music spells with the Do-Re-Mi Dream Spinner. Do-Re-Mi Wanderer and Dream Spinner, each sold separately from Bandai.
They were always airing the show at 7 a.m. maybe, and it was like Saturday, and I didn't feel like getting up that early. I ended up watching most of the series on the 4Kids website, where every single episode past 27 was exclusive to, mind you. They only aired like the first half of the season on TV. I never saw any of these toys in stores. I only saw them at a local flea market at a booth that carried overstock toys. If I was a middle-aged toy exec in the 2000s, and I glanced at this, I would also be nervous about whatever else this company was trying to offer me. Especially when they, weren't really choosing the best ways to sell it. But how exactly does this all play into Precure? You'll never guess what other Series 4 kids had their eyes on around this time. Maybe because Mew Mew Power was doing better than Do-Re-Mi, they were eyeing up Toei's much more recent Magical Girl series. Maybe a more action-y title would fare a little better? In February 2006, 4Kids had announced that they had acquired the rights to Futari wa Precure at New York Comic Con. And then it was complete radio silence until 2008 when the rights went back to Toei. There's not really any information as to why this happened, and we were really only left with speculation. Considering how their track record was going with shoujo anime at the time, though, I'm not really shocked they ended up losing interest that fast. If they couldn't even get their other two shows to air in full prior to this, would this one really be worth it? 4Kids was also slowly on the way out, going bankrupt by 2011 and eventually getting absorbed into Konami. After the abandonment of Precure by 4Kids, Toei went back to shopping it around on their own. They'd actually been doing this since pretty early on, starting around the time Max Heart originally premiered. There was also a pitch trailer produced sometime before 4Kids got involved that featured an English voice cast.
I really gotta make a wish quickly! I want a boyfriend!
Be careful what you wish for.
What are you talking about, Meppo? You have to use your Precure card!
By using their Precure cards, these two ordinary girls transform themselves to an experience that will give them the biggest thrills of their lives. What just happened to you?
Messenger of Light, I'm pure black! Messenger of Light, I'm pure white! We're the Precure!
They knew they had a gold mine on their hands, and they had successfully sold it to many other countries, but they were still having trouble convincing people. There was actually an alternate English dub produced in Singapore in around like 2005 or 2006, but not much is really known about this one. They finally opted to dub the show with Ocean Productions in late 2008, which would then air in Canada and the United Kingdom throughout 2009 and 2010. Five years after the original airing in Japan. When would this dub officially release in the United States? As previously stated, not until 2025. It took 16 years for Toei to finally drop it out of nowhere. It was part of this special YouTube series called Summer Weekend Splash, which also included Magical Do-Re-Mi, by the way. It's unknown why it took this long for this dub to show up here, or if there was any attempts to air it here prior. This dub was actually pretty faithful, all things considered. The majority of differences being a new opening and some character name changes. Nagisa Misumi was Natalie Blackstone, and Honoka Yukishiro was Hannah Whitehouse. Names are silly, sure, but they get the point across. Besides those, a lot of people consider it as close of a dub as you could probably get, which was actually somewhat rare around that time period, at least when, like, children's shows are concerned. A lot of people who are here that grew up with Glitter Force might not entirely be aware of this, but heavy localization was the standard for a very long time, and that only really started to fall out of practice by the late 2010s and into the 2020s. We do still often see character name changes, but nothing is as heavily altered as it was in decades past. Throughout the rest of the 2000s, outside of like a handful of direct-to-video releases, there were no successful attempts to bring another Magical Girl series to broadcast in the US. One of the most infamous examples is Mermaid Melody.
Princess Lucia, mermaid princess of the North Pacific, is in search of her lost pink pearl in a strange new world. Our world!
Which was fully dubbed, mind you, but never released because nobody wanted to broadcast it.
Did you know that a major toy company even partnered up with the show and made a bunch of cool toys that are exactly like the ones us mermaids have? The magic microphone is my favorite. Imagine all the kids in America singing the same magical mermaid melodies as we do in the show!
There were also attempts to bring Shugokara to the US under the title My Guardian Characters. While traditional broadcast was unsuccessful, it ended up being one of the first titles to be available on Crunchyroll when that became a legal streaming service. This was before they became the industry staple they are today, and before streaming really took off as a viable market. So while it did bring the series to cult status, it didn't really bring in as much exposure as it would have if it received a traditional TV broadcast. Precure in this time period continued to expand its empire. It had quickly become one of Toei's newest flagship brands, and was highly successful not only in Japan but throughout Asia and Europe, particularly in Italy. By the turn of the decade, they were eager to give Precure another shot in the English market. The beauty of having a meta-series is that every single series is somebody's introduction. So you could hypothetically start bringing it over at any point. They decided it was better to use a more recent installment. Instead of 2004's Futari wa Precure, they would start with 2007's Yes Precure 5. This series would have a more familiar feel to Westerners, being the first series to bring in a Sentai team as opposed to the original warrior duo. This was also, at the time, the most popular series internationally. Toei did already have a series of pitch trailers produced for the first 3 iterations.
A hero is inside us all. Meet 2 girls who are about to become legendary warriors. From the creators of the hugely successful Pretty Cure series, Toei Animation presents the latest exciting adventure, Pretty Cure Splash Star! Saki and Mai. Through a magical transformation, they become Pretty Cure! Here's Cure Blue! And Cure Eaglet!
Take to the Mad Giant Sword! To those who threaten the sacred springs, we're gonna put an end to your cruel behavior! Together, we are Pretty Cure!
Team up with Pretty Cure Splash Star! Yes! Pretty Cure 5! In the magic of the butterfly, Nozomi transforms into Cure Dream!
But this wasn't enough. Enter William Winkler, a Hollywood veteran who has done a little bit of everything. He had entered the anime dubbing market in the 80s. I reached out to him, and he was actually kind enough to let me speak to him on the phone for a while. So most of the info you're hearing right now came straight from him. In 2011, he was approached directly by Toei and asked to make a few pilots for them. These were episodes specifically selected in order to pitch the series to potential broadcasters, in hopes that at least one of them would get interested in airing it. 3 episodes were dubbed of Yes Precure 5. If the show were to be picked up, the original plan was to let Winkler and his company dub the remainder of the series. The 2 shows Toei was trying to sell were, as previously stated, Yes Precure 5 and Digimon Cross Wars, which was titled Digimon Fusion Battles. Most of the information we've had for years came from the IMDb page for the pilot, which featured a cast list and a peek at what the characters' names would be. The list is as follows. Nozomi Yumehara would be Priscilla.
Yep, that's what I prefer. I guess I'm just a first name kind of girl. Just don't get your hopes up, okay? Great news! She says she'll meet you right now! The mightiest magical girl, Cyrano!
Rin Natsuki was Lin. Urara Kasugano was Erika. Komachi Akimoto was Kimberly. Karen, Coco, and Nuts had their names remain unchanged. Girinma was Claw Mantis. And Bunby was Stinger Sam. Winkler also played the role of Claw Mantis. He told me the performance he went for was inspired by Jonathan Harris's character in the 1965 series Lost in Space.
Oh, the pain. The pain. Well, I do care. Here I was on the verge of checkmating you, my friend. Well, where did you go? I'm prepared to sacrifice myself. It's a far, far better thing that I do. Here, take back your filthy diamonds.
Side note, I know he mentioned to me at one point the actor who played Nuts, it was the actor that played Coco, right? He went to the Royal Academy for Dramatic Arts, and he kind of had a moment in the recording studio when he had to make all the goofy little noises Coco made, and he just kind of like looks at him, just kind of blank faced, and he's like, I went to RADA, and now I'm doing this.
Prince from another world. And he's a fluffy creature.
Winkler was putting a lot of love and care into these pilots. He wanted to make the experience as close to the original Japanese version as he possibly could. The name changes weren't even Winkler's pitch. The reason the characters' names were changed was because of Toei. Toei and Bandai had selected the names for him, and he had to use them. This was just a certain level of sacrifice you were expected to make in order to fit in with the guidelines of American broadcasters. These pilots seemingly went really well, actually. And there was a company interested in picking these shows up. Not a TV network, though, but another dubbing company.
But, and then I did pilots. I did pilots for Digimon, and I did pilots for Precure 5. And those turned out great, you know. Precure 5 was sort of like a Power Rangers with girls. There's a story to that, and I'll make it very quick. I made some really, what I thought were fantastic pilots for Digimon, okay? Really great pilots. The goal was we were to produce the series. William Winkler Productions made those pilots so that William... So we did these pilots for Digimon, and they were successful with the test audiences and were played at trade shows, and then a little while later they wound up on American television, but William Winkler Productions was not dubbing them as we had expected to do because we made these sensational pilots. That's show business, right?
Owned by one man who has a lot of power in the industry.
What do you want? Here's what I want. I want all that money back. That's what I want. I want you to give me that money. It's my money. I want my money.
And a very close relationship with Toei. Though throughout the 2010s, they had taken a break from children's television, by the 2010s, they were ready to make a big return. Enter Saban Brands. In April of 2013, Saban had announced plans for an upcoming new series. This series was described to be about 5 young girls who transform into magical superheroes. A lot of people already knew what was about to become almost instantly, with sites like Crunchyroll reporting on it. Was there really any way to be sure, though? It was a fairly generic concept. A 5-member magical girl team wasn't really a new concept. We had our hunches, but it could be literally about anything. It wasn't even called Precure, for crying out loud. It was called Gangnam Girls. Yeah, that's right. Gangnam Girls. This was hot off the tail of Psy's generational classic, and a lot of people wanted to cash in. But still, what? What? Now. This is what we in the business call a working title. Meaning they just called it that to give them something to refer to it as. They very likely never intended to actually send that title to market. Why, though? Out of all the titles, how did they come to that one? That's something we're never gonna get a true answer to. I've kind of, come to terms with this in my mind. But that's not really the important part. How did we know for sure this was Precure? Our answer came in August of that same year. As previously mentioned, Precure was doing very well for itself in Italy. While toy sales ended after season 1, the ratings were doing well enough that the dub continued all the way up to season 7, even rivaling reruns of Sailor Moon. I've had Italians tell me it was even on the same level as their #1 cultural export, Winx Club. Just as they were getting ready to dub Season 8 and the first 2 All-Stars films, the plug got pulled. TV network Rai had lost the rights. When fans contacted them to ask why, they pointed their fingers to Saban. Now, who exactly is Saban? Haim Saban is a man with a very storied history. He got into the entertainment industry via composing songs for cartoons, and in the 90s developed a relationship with Toei. His company decided to take their Super Sentai series, refilm the out-of-costume bits with American actors, and call it Power Rangers. This was a huge success, further cementing Saban's empire. Many people I've spoken to in the industry have described Haim as a powerful man, especially with his relationship with Toei.
Turns out that some Japanese people don't like to deal with people they don't know. They hadn't sold one episode anywhere ever. So I went to a guy that used to act as an agent for American companies, and I said, "Do you know this company, Toei company that produces the Ranger series?" He says, "Yeah, I work with them a lot." He said, "Can you do me a favor? I want to try and buy." And so from day one, Power Rangers had hurdles. They didn't want to sell to me because they didn't know me. Anyway, he introduces me. They agree to sell it to me. And I pay for 50 episodes. I pay $500,000 for 50 episodes, worldwide rights for 10 years. Basically, I stole it.
As he distributed many of their franchises internationally, Digimon being the second most notable. After selling all assets to Disney in the 2000s, Saban decided to re-enter the game by the 2010s, and relaunched Power Rangers in 2011 through a deal with Nickelodeon. Now, for Glitter Force, the next year and a half or so was radio silence. We heard whispers of it, but no real solid details. In that time, Digimon Fusion had actually begun to air on television in 2013. First airing on Nickelodeon before being sent to Nick's graveyard, Nicktoons. I was a dedicated Nicktoons watcher because Nicktoons was the cable spin-off channel that Nickelodeon sent all of their good shows to die. It wasn't fun. Digifusion would also air on Vortex, a syndication block by Saban that aired on the CW that was taking up a slot that was previously held by 4Kids. Vortex would later be shut down in September of 2014. To many people, this marked the end of the Saturday morning cartoon. For Saban, this complicated things for them. This part is pure speculation, and I want you to take it with so many grains of salt. We had already established from the beginning Precure was trying to be sold stateside alongside Digimon Fusion. Despite this, Digimon was able to release much sooner than Precure. I believe this could have been due to the fact they were having trouble finding a network willing to air Precure. We've gone over all the historic precedent for this. Trying to get a show of this nature to air on American television is much easier said than done. Even if they had their own block, it was gone before they could even put anything out. What about Nickelodeon? If most of Saban's bigger shows were on there, were they not interested? Very likely that was the case. Nick isn't really known for airing anime dubs, at least not this kind of anime dub. We could see that with how quickly Digimon Fusion was cast aside. There's also the obvious gender issue. I've purposely narrowed the scope of this video to only talk about anime dubs, but Western productions don't really get the best treatment all the time either. There were like 4 other magical girl shows in the 2010s that Nick notably fumbled.
But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
So, we were left to wait. And wait, we did. We heard various mentions in the mysterious Glitter Girls project over the next few months, and then it finally happened. I still remember that day, actually. September 2015, I had just started my sophomore year of high school. I came home from school and I logged onto my family computer like I normally did every night. News had come during the lead up to the licensing expo known as MIPCOM.
If you need to find your way into kids programming, 2 days before MIPCOM, on October 15, we will serve you the next MIP Junior on a silver platter. All you need to do right now is get yourself down to the French Riviera.
Saban had finally announced their show, now under the title Glitter Force. We got to see the first preview image, and it was confirmed to be an adaptation of the 2012 series Smile Precure. This was when the new era truly began. On October 1st, 2015, Precure fans were told to turn on the TV. Any channel, doesn't matter which one. Glitter Force was officially announced to be releasing on Netflix, and was slated for December 18th of that same year. We all started scouring the net for any info we could find. Even the smallest note from a foreign voice actor was like gold to us. I remember for a bit we all thought the character was going to be named like Glitter Color because the Spanish voice actress for March, or I guess Spring, said that her dub name was going to be Glitter Verde in the Spanish dub. So we thought she was going to be like Glitter Green or something.
Hey guys, it's me, April, aka Glitter Green from Glitter Force.
This seems to be a non-English thing though. Our next major update would come about a week before release, when it was announced that the soundtrack for the series would be performed by the girl group Blush. Neither I nor anybody I knew had heard of them prior, but like, they were doing collabs with Snoop Dogg, so they clearly had some relevance. I guess I just wasn't tuned in hard enough. And like as a side note, the styling for this music video was like the most mid-2010s thing I can imagine. Then, the day it finally dropped, this was when everything blew up. Most of this is coming from my own personal recollections, so apologies I don't exactly have sources on these claims. It's just all, like, direct eyewitness reports right now. It ended up as one of Netflix's top trending shows very quickly. It was also one of the top trending Twitter topics of that day. That may not sound significant, but I need you to understand that 2015 Twitter was like a completely different website than the modern X the Everything app. The trending tab used to actually mean something. There was no AI, there was no grok, it was all ranked in chronological order based purely on the amount of tweets mentioning the phrase. And Glitter Force was, in fact, one of the hottest topics of that day. This had breached far beyond the existing Precure fandom. The most common reaction was a phrase that will make a lot of the oldies in the Magical Girl fandom flinch. Sailor Moon ripoff. This was the claim primarily from millennial parents whose kids were becoming very quickly engrossed by the show. I have no idea why my kid's been so into Spider-Man. This is such a Superman ripoff. This is what you actually sound like when you say things like that, by the way. While outsiders were bickering about fairly inconsequential things, the actual pre-existing fandom was also bickering their fair share. I mean, people have been arguing about the concept of this for years until this point. Many people just completely opposed to the concept of English dub, which I mean, like, something you're probably familiar with the general anime fandom, but in the Precure fandom especially, or like a lot of kids anime shows, people are just like dead set, like, no, you can't dub this, ever. They didn't even care about the quality of them, the fact that you just sat down and said, I'm gonna dub it, no, that's wrong! Sorry, that's my impression of a No Friends anime fan. Those kinds of people tend to forget they aren't really the target audience of shows like Precure, but I digress. What we ended up getting was the exact kind of English dub people fearmonger about when they talk about how much they hate English dubs. At least back then. Now people fearmonger that the English dubs are gonna be woke, but in the 2010s people were still like very afraid of like 4Kid style dubs. The most obvious change was the title. Fitting of the company that brought us Power Rangers, you may think this season is some kind of lost spin-off to that series. Likewise, all the character names were also changed. The Cure designation was replaced with Glitter. So we had Miyuki, Cure Happy, who was Emily, aka Glitter Lucky. Akane, Cure Sunny, was Kelsey, Glitter Sunny. Yoyoi, Cure Peace, was Lily, Glitter Peace. Now, Cure March was April, Glitter Spring. Lastly, Reika, Cure Beauty, was Chloe, Glitter Breeze. The fairies had their names unchanged, except for the fact that they were now called pixies instead of fairies. The villains also had their names changed, my personal favorite being Joker to Rascal, and I understand why you probably had to change that one for like potential like copyright concerns, but like Rascal's a really silly one, I will admit. They also changed location names, like the Bad End Kingdom to the Shadow Realm? The Shadow Realm? Are they allowed to say that? Glitter Force lasted a total of 2 seasons, basically splitting the original series in half, but totaling 40 episodes, missing 8 episodes of the original series run. Glitter Force took place in the most vague possible, possibly American, possibly not, town, so any mentions of them explicitly living in Japan had to be altered. One notable example were the episodes where they took a class field trip to places like Kyoto and Osaka, but it was just changed to be the Asia Pacific Expo, where they looked at replica pagodas and saw geisha actresses. If they could not be altered, such as many of Akane's episodes, they were just flat out removed. Akane's family runs an okonomiyaki restaurant, something that is very Japanese. In episodes where they do mention it, they often call it Japanese pizza, which is actually a phrase that predates Glitter Force. I know a lot of people thought this was something that they made up entirely, but it seems like they did actually research a little bit before they came up with this alternative name, because I was not actually familiar with this prior either. There was also an Akane episode that was cut not because of location issues, but because of language barrier. This was episode 36, which revolved around Akane meeting a British exchange student and later forming a crush on him. He is later mentioned in Glitter Force, but changed to be a famous athlete that Kelsey had written fan mail to. Besides setting, another thing that was majorly reduced was emotion. For a show called Smile, there sure were a lot of frowns. A bit of historical context may be required here if you're unfamiliar with this specific Precure season, because there's actually a lot more that went into this than you may realize. Smile Precure was born in the aftermath of the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami. This was the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Japan, and still stands as the 4th largest documented earthquake in history. It also resulted in the Fukushima nuclear disaster, which is regarded as the worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl. This was Japan's worst natural disaster. This already would have been a struggle for anyone to cope with, but especially if you were a child in this situation. Children's entertainment plays a powerful role in this regard. Just as Sesame Street had addressed 9/11.
I think after 9/11, we were all very affected since Sesame Street's produced in New York. And we were in production, and those of us who were traveling to the studio that day over the Triborough Bridge saw the destruction, saw the cloud. We were very aware of what was going on, and most of our shows were already written, but 4 were not. And so we immediately had a meeting and said, what can we do in those 4 shows that will somehow resonate with children? Because children, even though PBS, our broadcast system, and we felt that Sesame Street should be a safe haven, we said, children are not oblivious to what's just happened. We need to find a legitimate way to deal with it.
A special message featuring the Precure All-Stars to the children of Japan was released in March of 2011, declaring that all their hearts are one. This was just the first step, though. This isn't the type of thing you'd move on from by next week. Some of these kids had lost their families, their schools, their homes, their pets. Charity organizations Save the Children reported that as many as 100,000 children were displaced. These were the emotions they held when they began to conceptualize the Precure season for 2012. Smile. A title that evokes happiness. Happy would even be the lead character's name. The main motif would be fairy tales, something that has brought comfort to children for centuries. The plot structure would be fairly episodic, with a large focus on comedy hijinks. In that regard, you could see how this was kind of the ideal season to sell abroad. The 5-member team is a very familiar format. It even had the same character designer as the previous season they tried to sell in English. The average episode was very fit for a Saturday morning cartoon, even if that was a nearly dead institution by the 2010s. The one thing that was going to get lost no matter what was the responsibility it had specifically to Japanese children in 2012. It didn't have to get entirely lost, though. The characters of Smile face plenty of tragedy and hardship, and none of it is ever the result of a natural disaster. All kids face varying levels of tragedy in their life, no matter where they're from. It is your ability to survive and overcome those tragedies that makes your next smile all the more powerful. In order for there to be a rainbow, you have to survive the storm. Glitter Force, however, couldn't let those hardships get too hard. This was one of the most common fan critiques outside of the heavy localization. It couldn't let a moment of silence linger for too long. It couldn't let you think the characters were actually in danger. What if little Lakin at home gets too scared?
Oh, maybe he'll miss us. Well, Glitter Spring, what do you do now? How good are your brothers and sisters at playing catch? Now who's applesauce?
Oh, come on! You okay, Spring?
This This is the exact same clip my friend Starlight used in a video a while back because I feel like this just kind of perfectly illustrates the point. This is also largely believed to be the reason behind one of the most controversial episode redactions, episode 19, Thank You Papa, Yayoi's Treasure. This episode, which was released near Father's Day, revolves around a class assignment where the girls have to ask their parents how their names were selected. This could have been enough of a reason for the episode to get skipped, because the discussions of etymology might be tricky to translate, their names not really 100% lining up with the original Japanese meanings. However, there's another big reason a lot of people think this episode was likely skipped for. You see, Yayoi, she's placed in a really awkward situation. Her dad had selected her name for her, but she couldn't ask why, as her dad passed away at some point prior to the start of the series. She spends the episode talking with her mom, trying to see if she could remember any reason why her dad chose that name. She finally remembers when they stumble upon a church they went together when she was younger. I honestly think this could have been another reason this episode was skipped. A lot of dubs like this tend to avoid any kind of potential religious theme. Regardless of the potential motivations for skipping this episode, a lot of people were upset about this episode specifically being cut. Many people consider it not only to be one of the season's best, but an absolute franchise highlight. And I will admit, that includes myself. I'm going to get a tad personal for a moment. Smile was actually the first Precure season I had watched in full, as I'd struggled with subtitles when I was younger. I was about 12 years old when Smile Precure was airing, and I watched it as it aired weekly. It's a very special season to me as I watched it at a point in my life when I was struggling a lot. I didn't actually go out and do a full rewatch before writing this video, but I did rewatch this episode specifically, since this is one of the ones that kind of stood out in my memory the most. At age 12, I liked it, but I didn't really fully get it. At age 25, now 26 at the point that I'm filming, I have been living without my father for almost 8 years. I damn near cried when I rewatched that episode. And I agree, cutting this episode off from a good portion of the world is an insane tragedy. This is an episode that probably hit close to home for a lot of kids after the earthquake, but this is still a universal experience. I may not have had to lose my father until I was barely an adult, but many people had to go through this way, way younger. The amount of kids in episodes like this could have helped was immeasurable. But then again, this was entirely years-long fandom speculation. It could have been the church, it could have been the names. We may never know. But regardless, I do wish this episode would have been included. On a lighter note, we didn't talk about the music in depth yet, have we? This series has a completely new soundtrack, composed by Haim's bestie Gnome Keneal. This, of course, includes a new theme song, and even new endings. Endings are normally something that get neglected in English dubs. Yes, I said endings. Smile had 2 of them, so obviously they had to replace both, and then add 8 more. As previously stated, all these songs were performed by the girl group Blush. 7 of those were original to Glitter Force, composed by Keneal, but the remaining 3 were just pre-existing songs from Blush's discography. These songs felt somewhat out of place, and you could tell. These songs existed prior to even Gangnam Girls. And honestly, I'm fine with that. I'm gonna be real, I'm completely fine with that. I think about All-Star constantly to this very day. I was just on a plane for the first time in years a couple weeks ago, and the entire time I was just thinking to myself, we on a jet plane to LA, hit the beaches for the day.
So, seeing as the ending is the only thing that could potentially get this video blocked, by Hasbro, by the way, I am now only going to be able to show you screen caps of the endings. So, you can make of this what you will.
Up in streets, flashing lights, what am I gonna wear tonight? I wasn't on LA too. I wasn't on a jet plane to LA though. And one of the biggest reasons most people remember these is because of the animation. Sure, the first two just reused original show footage, but the rest? Toei didn't make any of them for them. They had to outsource. The little money they had left went into commissioning new visuals for these songs, and I'm gonna be honest, they look rough. A project reel was recently found on YouTube by an Indonesia-based animator who seems to be responsible for them. If you look at the rest of the channel, nothing else seems to be as rough as these. I didn't have enough time to reach out to this guy, so I don't know if it was a mix of small budget, lack of time, the fact that this person probably had to work solo, or maybe a combination of all three. I did speak with someone at Saban who confirmed lack of budget, but we're getting ahead of ourselves here. I'm the last guy to rag on $5 in a dream. Just look at the quality of this video. Either way, these made these endings memorable for better or for worse. Season 1, despite the heavy criticism, had a very strong response. The second half of Smile would be released in August the following year. And at the time, most people figured, that's probably the end of Glitter Force, right? Even though we saw obvious signs that it was fairly successful, a lot of people just instantly assumed it was flopping. Netflix didn't really release like watch hours and stuff like that at the time, and most of the people claiming this just didn't go outside or interact with spaces where they might hear the opinions of children. The most we were able to gather was from mommy bloggers and Instagram accounts. You would very frequently see pictures of kids' Glitter Force themed birthday parties or Glitter Force Halloween costumes. Surely, we would understand the true scale when the toys came out. Right? When the toys came out. When the toys... They didn't release any toys. They didn't release any toys! And nobody knows exactly what happened here. Especially now that we know for sure that Bandai was involved in previous attempts to bring Precure over. Sorry, I got like a guy here and I got distracted. It was very odd that there was no known attempt to release a line of Glitter Force toys. They had to have been though, right? This is the Korean release, by the way. I don't have batteries in it, but this speaks Korean. What was the point of bringing over a toy commercial and then not actually releasing the toys? We know for a fact that Bandai was directly involved in the Yes 5 pilots. So surely they were involved at some point here, right? I unfortunately could not find much of an answer for that. The only thing I could tell you that merchandise for streaming-based properties has very weird history. Glitter Force, in many regards, existed in a transitionary point for the entertainment industry as a whole. They were very much still figuring out how streaming was going to work in the grand scheme of things. Glitter Force came out right as it was just starting to seem viable. That doesn't mean they had everything solved right away, though. There were a lot of Netflix properties with toys that had very quickly faded into obscurity. Most Netflix toys I've seen in person have been at discount chains like Ollie's. I remember seeing the toys for Netflix's Voltron for the first time at that store, which was a show that released about a half a year after Glitter Force. That, combined with past failures like Magical Do-Re-Mi, probably had people hesitant to try Glitter Force. Despite its lack of toys, it was still successful enough to warrant another season being dubbed. In early 2017, we received our first leaks that Doki Doki Precure would be receiving the Glitter Force treatment. This dub would follow the same strategy as the previous series, with all the same localization and heavy edits. This time, we had Mana to Maya, Rika to Rachel, Kenzaki Makoto to Mackenzie Mack, that's honestly one of my personal favorite dub names, I'm gonna be for real there, and Alice to Clara. She already had an English name. I don't really know why they felt the name to change it, but I still think that one's fairly silly. And there was also a Guri to Natalie, not to be confused with Natalie Blackstone. The transformed names were pretty much the same, with Cure being changed to Glitter again, the only major changes being Cure Sword to Glitter Spade, and Cure Rosetta to Glitter Clover, in order to make the card theme more obvious. Doki Doki Precure originally had 49 episodes, while Glitter Force Doki Doki only had 30. They didn't cut 19 episodes entirely, but instead combined a bunch of episodes together. Episode 1 comprises of episodes 1 and 2 of the original series. They did outright skip a lot of crucial episodes, though, and it led to some strange plot holes. They just skipped an episode where they got a major power-up like it was nothing. Though, honestly, since it was Doki Doki, I honestly think it kind of improved the experience. I know this is a statement that's going to get me attacked now. But we all kind of hated Doki Doki while it was airing in 2013, at least on Tumblr. I might be exaggerating on that, but I remember that being a series that was very wildly debated, but honestly the trend of people hating a series while it's airing and loving it later, it's still going to this day. But I feel like a lot of the reasons people have come back around on Doki Doki is because it's mostly Glitter Force kids that are coming in and saying, oh no, this is actually Kino. And there are, like, a lot of it that in retrospect, like, oh yeah, I remember why I was so engrossed in this series in the first half now. And I'll say, because of Glitter Force Doki Doki, I have come back to look upon Doki Doki much more fondly. While I do prefer to watch things as they air, it can be easy to forget certain moments while watching something weekly for a whole year. When I had to binge it, it made me remember, oh yeah, this did actually have a really solid run until it got to the part that pissed me off. Doki Doki's release was a lot quieter than the previous series and a lot quicker. While Glitter Force Vanilla had about an 8-month gap between releases, Doki Doki's gap was only around 3 months. This would be the end of the line for Glitter Force, due entirely to outside forces. Shortly before the release of Doki Doki, the rights to the Glitter Force trademark had actually transferred back to Toei. Saban still had distribution rights to the series and was able to put out the rest of what they had produced. In 2018, we received the final nail in the coffin. Initially, it was announced that the toy rights to Power Rangers would be transferred from Bandai to Hasbro. In May, it was announced that Saban was actually transferring the rights of everything they owned to Hasbro, including Glitter Force. Do you know who got credited on Anime News Network for first noticing the Hasbro mark on the Glitter Force website? That's right, it was me, baby! On a suspended account that wasn't properly backed up. But I still have remnants of this. Saban officially ceased operations on July 2nd, 2018. Hasbro, while they still own some distribution rights, I actually got a copyright takedown from them on a video on a separate channel in 2025. Besides this, they ended up letting most of the Precure rights go back to Toei. Glitter Force managed to linger on Netflix until November 2024, when it finally got removed. The era of Glitter Force had come to a close. I know you probably still have a lot of questions right now, because so did I. I wanted to know exactly what happened. If I wanted to know exactly what happened, I would have to go to the source. I managed to reach someone who used to work at Saban, though due to complicated reasons, she couldn't tell me much. What she did tell me, though, really painted the picture. Melissa Flores was the director of development and production at Saban, and the executive in charge for Glitter Force. This doesn't mean she was the one making solely all the decisions, this just meant she oversaw the entire production. Every decision was made by an entire team at all angles, and yes, this did mean Toei had to sign off on everything. Melissa knew of Precure prior to the production of Glitter Force, but she had to go on a deep dive during the start of the development for the dub. She covered all of her bases, even watching a bunch of those Kigurumi stage shows. She grew to love the series just as much as we do, and she is aware of how many people feel about Glitter Force.
I know a lot because I did anime stuff before when I was also doing Power Rangers, which people actually absolutely probably hate before because I did Glitter Force and people do not like Glitter Force.
So, Why was the show changed so drastically? Fun fact, initially they did not want to change the title. They wanted to keep the Precure title. It was ultimately decided to be changed due to parent reaction. In the entertainment business, companies will often use what is known as a focus group while they are developing entertainment concepts. People will be randomly selected and shown a new show, and their ideas will be used to further refine the concept. This was done in order to gauge the average American's reaction to Precure, one that might not be as familiar with anime. These parents did not like the Precure title. They said it evoked the image of characters being hot nurses. Insert Animaniacs clip here.
Hello, nurse!
Basically, you don't hate Glitter Force, you hate the sacrifices the entertainment industry forces upon creatives for the sake of profit margins and marketability. Business is hard. Sacrifices often have to get made in order to get everyone on the same page. While a lot of people in that boardroom do want to provide the best experience they can for the child, at the end of the day, they have to land on what's going to make that company the most money. Making a product you are certain will appeal to as broad of an audience as possible is usually the approach they go for. There's also the fact that they usually had to make heavy alterations simply because standards and practices told them they had to. American S&P is notoriously way stricter than Japan's.
What are standards and practices?
Well, that's an interesting question, Meatwad. Here, let's take a look at this video.
Standards and practices are a vital link in keeping good and funny ideas away from you, the television viewer.
This is pretty much evident if you look at the entirety of anime dubbing history from the conception of anime to right around when Glitter Force came out, actually. When the first season premiered, there were actually still a decent amount of dubs like that being released. The remnants of 4Kids got taken over by Konami, who was still following those same practices. Donbal Senki's English dub, LBX, was airing its second season when Glitter Force premiered. This dub was so heavily altered that the first season, that was originally 44 episodes, was reduced down to 26. This shift was occurring almost simultaneously as Glitter Force. The English dub of Yokai Watch premiered very shortly before Glitter Force and was making great strides. Obviously, due to the untranslatable nature of a lot of puns, a lot of names were still changed, but it was still shockingly close. And, I mean shockingly. There's a lot of things in there I was, shocked they got away with airing on Disney. Because, I was watching the show both subbed and dubbed while it was airing. Twitter completely broke the search function, so you're gonna have to trust me on this one, but I do remember one of the writers of the dub saying at one point that the Yokai Watch English dub takes place in a vaguely American town that just so happens to use Japanese currency. People were realizing you could keep a lot more than you'd think, and kids just wouldn't question it. And I'm sure it's obvious at this point this was an ongoing debate for decades. This was something that made way more sense in the pre-internet days. Back before every kid had an iPad straight out of the womb. These days, kids will find the fandom wiki within seconds. People are going to know and very likely seek out the original. Glitter Force is a symbol of transition in a lot of aspects. It represents the transition of anime dubbing practices, and the tradition from traditional TV to streaming services. It is trapped in the cusp of both of these changes. And those are changes that are very closely linked to each other anyway. Things are more accessible now than ever, and that is a huge part as to why this doesn't happen anymore. In the 2020s, I'd say the majority of kids' anime dubs are pretty faithful. I think the exact moment I realized when we were in a new era is when they revealed Pokemon Horizons, and they were keeping the main character's name as Liko, unchanged. Pokemon, whose early dubs are still symbolic of these types of changes. Beyblade X is an absolutely fantastic dub, and again, very few changes outside of name changes and a couple weird glossing over of certain Beyblades, but nothing too drastic to the plot. Toei's actually simul-dubbing Digimon now, and I've been told it's an excellent dub. I still need to check it out.
Oh, it's a piece of shit.
Some of the last few dubs to be produced like this, like LBX, faded into obscurity, largely due to being TV releases with no major streaming support. Glitter Force, in that regard, was actually far ahead of the curve. I don't think nearly as many people will remember it if it wasn't on Netflix for a whole 9 years. This could be why so many younger fans seem especially confused by it. If they found the series after it ended, they may not have really seen many other dubs like this before. They sure as hell didn't have access to many other Magical Girl dubs. The only other Magical Girl anime dubs in the same demographic to come out in the past 15 years have been a redub of Sailor Moon plus its reboot, and a dub of Cardcaptor Sakura's sequel, Clear Card. Glitter Force was more popular than both of those franchises on Netflix in 2023, by the way. I want you to think about the bigger picture. When you do, you realize how much of a triumph it is that we even got Precure at all. How many close calls we had prior to Glitter Force. How many times similar shows got cancelled prematurely or just never came out at all. I've had to fine-tune this to just the struggles of Magical Girl anime targeted at children. 'Cause we could be here all day discussing the struggles in both the anime and children's entertainment licensing industry. There's this very good video by Colleen's Manga Rex if you want to see how this looked in the manga publishing industry. There was also another very good video by That Kodocha Girl that dropped while I was working on this. This really intersects so many fields because of a scary word that starts with the letter S. Even as recently as 2022, there was an executive at Warner insisting that girls graduate out of animation and simply do not see themselves in it. Girls do not see themselves in animation because you make it difficult for them to do so. Acclaimed artist Lauren Faust, known for working on shows in the same demographic as Precure, responded by saying, "Western animation does not give girls what they want." Keyword being Western, as the demographic is thoroughly covered throughout Asia. I'd even say this isn't necessarily a Western issue, but more of an American one, because this is also very thoroughly covered throughout Europe. Have we had exceptions? Yeah, but that doesn't stop execs from insisting otherwise. Is it a little frustrating how much it got watered down for the sake of stonks? Yeah, I won't argue with that. But do you know what is one thing they managed to keep in the dub? The very essence of the show itself.
Can save you, but then she can only play defense with her little shield, right? So you're kind of useless, aren't you, Clover?
Sometimes, girls want to go crazy, and we should let them. This is a show for girls, something they deserve to have, and you can never take that away from it. If you grew up watching Glitter Force, you have nothing to be ashamed of. All the joy you received from it is something you should cherish. I still remember I went on a Disney World trip in 2017, and I had a bunch of Precure keychains and badges all over my backpack, and very regularly in line, I'd hear, like, children behind me whispering to, like, siblings, like, parents, whatever, like, "Look, she has Glitter Force on her bag." I was actually really happy to hear that back then, and I'm still happy thinking about it now. Also, it's not like Haim Saban signed off on the rights to Precure in all of the known universe like he did for Super Sentai. So this has been a net positive for Precure's international popularity. Precure is more popular now than ever, and it's because of Glitter Force. I conducted a small survey. I only got around like 130-ish responses, but what I was given was enough to paint the picture. When asked if participants knew of Glitter Force before discovering Precure, 65.9% said yes. These results get more fascinating when you split it by age bracket. 'Cause really, I thought it was going to be mostly the younger fans, but this seemed to be the case across the entire board. It's the majority in every bracket, except for 21 to 24 when it's literally only off by 1. Generally, the fandom does skew a lot younger these days. with a little under 60% of participants being 20 and under. I remember when I was younger, I felt like the odd one out being a young teenager in the Precure fandom. All the people I knew online were either in their later teens or 20s. It's been a complete 180 since then. 'Cause really, back when I was younger watching Precure, there wasn't really an avenue to discover it for most kids unless they were chronically online since kindergarten like I was. And let's be real, that's how most of the younger Zoomers in Gen Alpha are. Leading kids from Glitter Force to Precure is actually something Melissa told me she hoped for. She's even told her own nieces about Precure. One of my friends saw a kid dressed as Cure Spicy during Halloween in 2025, so that pipeline is working. There has been a lot of things in the past year that has turned the entertainment industry on its head. Uncut anime releases are doing numbers at the box office, further solidifying the consumer's want for their anime to be as close to the Japanese release as possible. But there was something else that came out in the past year. Not an anime, but I still feel like it's very closely related. A certain movie release that was not only proudly displaying its Korean culture, but unabashedly about girls. It had a plot that felt like it could have easily come from the pages of Nakayoshi, the same magazine that printed stuff like Sailor Moon, Tokyo Mew Mew, Shugokara, Mermaid Melody, and yes, even Precure. A certain movie which is now the most watched Netflix release of all time. The production team behind K-pop Demon Hunters have even proudly declared their magical girl anime influence on multiple occasions. It's going to be very interesting how the industry reacts to this. I've seen a lot of Western toy companies jump to make K-pop and girl group toys, but they're focusing on the K-pop part of the title and not the Demon Hunters part. Anime specifically has more than enough content to fill this niche. There was even a Precure series that just aired that focused on idols, ignoring all the controversy going on about it right now. Toei, I am nudging your shoulder as hard as I can right now. Anyway, let's catch up a little bit. In the past 5 years, Toei has been trying to make up for lost time. Most likely due to Precure's collab with the 2020 Olympics, or having to do with COVID lockdowns reducing revenue, Precure did begin simulcasting in 2020. As Healin' Good Precure came back from a hiatus, it began simulcasting on Crunchyroll. This was a major request for years at this point. They have continued to simulcast the series to this very day. They even included a lot of spin-off series like Otona Precure. There are currently 14 out of 23 mainline seasons available on Crunchyroll. Smile and Doki Doki have yet to be included. You could also watch Futariwa's dub on YouTube for a bit. For a few months. This was a limited time release for a summer event, and as soon as the summer was over, it was pulled from YouTube, and now there's no way to legally watch Futariwa Precure anymore. Just kidding. I have a curse of major updates happening right around the time I drop a video. It's happened to me like three times maybe now. But thankfully, with all the delays this video had, I was able to catch this one before I concluded it. Futariwa Precure's English dub is going to be added to Hulu and Disney Plus on February 23rd, 2026. We're making baby steps, but this is still huge progress. The lack of dubs for the majority of seasons is what I feel is one of the biggest accessibility issues. Precure's primary demographic covers a very young group of children, and not all of those children are going to be on the same reading level. Even though I was a pretty good reader as a kid, I struggled with subtitles for years. I started watching anime when I was like 5, 6, 7 maybe, and I didn't start watching things subbed until I was about 11, 12, 13-ish. And even then, there's people who are older but still prefer dubs, whether it be because they have vision issues or they just prefer dubs. There are people out there that genuinely prefer dubs. I know this is something people have trouble wrapping their mind around. In terms of toys and merch, this is also still pretty much non-existent. The only exception is that people have encountered gachapons at places like Round 1. I've only found evidence of one set making it to the US though. So it's these 4 figures, the only official Precure merch you could buy in the US, directly distributed by Bandai. You might also occasionally find like third-party like candy distributors bringing like Precure snacks and stuff like FYE and stuff, but like in terms of like, merch. Sure, importing is easier than ever these days, except for the tariff situation, but it's not something every parent is going to be savvy to. My mom used to refuse to buy me anything that wasn't from Amazon when I was a child, insisting eBay and any other shopping site was a scam. You can imagine how many Sailor Moon bootlegs I owned as a child. Even today, not every parent knows you could go to Zen Market using code XCanadensis for 500 points off your first order. Look, it would be nice to walk into Walmart to buy the newest Henshin device, but I know I'm asking a lot with that one. I will note that there is a much larger selection of anime toys in the toy aisle than there used to be 10 years ago, and a lot more of it is for kids than you would think. The closest you could get right now is there's this line called Shibajuku Anime. I haven't seen this particular doll on shelves, but I've seen other in the line on shelves. There's a doll that in the initial product mock-up photos is straight up wearing a recolor of Curestar's dress. You could buy borderline Precure knockoffs that are just legally distinct enough, but you can't get actual Precure toys. Bandai does have their own collector shopping site, Premium Bandai, which does not offer a Precure section in the US. Premium Bandai not only makes it difficult to order from the Japanese side of things, but you can't even browse Japanese listings without getting automatically redirected to the English site. I can't even look at stock photos unless I got a VPN on. No sponsor for today before anybody asks. At New York Toy Fair 2025, I did have the privilege of speaking directly to people at Bandai Namco Toys and Collectibles America. Yes, that is their full legal now. I've been corrected on this. More importantly, I did manage to strike up a conversation with who may be the biggest Precure fan at their US branch. Shoutouts to AJ Velasco. He did unfortunately tell me there isn't much activity at the moment, but this is always subject to change.
And honestly, I make it a point sometimes to be like, you see this comment? Like, look how many people are like saying they want this, they want that, they want that. The company itself likes to consider. You guys are the voices. Right. You guys are the ones that kind of help dictate where you guys want to see your stuff, where you want to see your collectibles in the future as well. So, for what I like to say to a lot of people is, even though it's not out yet or whatever is not happening, just scream it out into the universe and let it happen.
I like that.
Because at one point when it does, you're like, yeah, it's here. It's here. We got it now.
Yes.
If this franchise taught you anything, it should be that you should never give up hope.
何の努力もしないで叶う夢なんて夢じゃないって言ってた
If there's one thing I've learned in the past 10 years, it's that there's always people in the industry fighting alongside you. There are people on that side doing everything in their power to see Precure or any other show like it succeed, and they can't do it alone. This is where we as a community play a huge role. We have to be vocal about our love of Precure. Draw fan art, make videos, discuss the show, discuss your collections, recommend the show to your friends. If you're watching this video right now and you've only seen Glitter Force, go make the plunge for yourself. I normally tell my friends to either start with whatever has the most appealing designs to them, or with the currently airing season. The newest season, Star Detective Precure, just started a couple weeks before this video came out. You could start right there! It's kinda crazy that they already made a season based off of this video. Also, try to support officially where you can. Make sure to check the Futari dub out on Hulu at least. I understand Crunchyroll hasn't had the most consumer-friendly practices as of late, but this does help prove interest. This can also be easier said than done if you want to watch something that isn't available yet. If you want to watch Smile or Doki Doki, either subbed or as Glitter Force, you could only pirate them at the moment. I hope this changes soon, but at least they've been posting unsubbed clips on their socials, so maybe they're coming soon? I'm hoping. I'm hoping. Copium, hopium. Speaking of the clips, following the new official Instagram account is a pretty easy way to support it. You may be saying right now, like, oh, nothing ever happens, this ain't gonna work. Clearly, it has. Even if progress has been slow, it's been working for other fandoms longer than the average Glitter Force fan has even been alive. We need to start taking a page out of the 90s Sailor Moon fandom's playbook. You need to buy the proverbial Pop-Tarts. I'll keep fighting. I'm fighting for this little girl I used to know. She used to make MS Paint recolors of the Fresh and Heart Catch cures. She was explaining the plot of Heart Catch to the kids on the playground at school so they could roleplay with her. She'd take Barbies and dye their hair with Sharpie and make notebook paper clothes and call them Precure dolls. When she was about 12 years old in middle school, she made this really bad smell Precure abridged series that only lasted 2 episodes, but she got to have fun with her best friend making that. When she got into high school, she started making fake Precure leaks, just so she could imagine what it's like working at Toei to make a Precure series. She just turned 26, and she's speaking to her phone on a tripod in the attic she rents out. I'm glad the Glitter Force kids have a higher likelihood of their classmates knowing what they're talking about. I'm glad they got to experience Precure, even if it was in a different form. I had to experience Deke Sailor Moon, Mew Mew Power, and all those other dubs when I was a kid. And I'm still grateful for them, even if I prefer the much more faithful versions. If you grew up with Glitter Force, those memories are a part of you forever now. I hope you cherish those memories just as much as I cherish those shows and the 360p Precure clips I watched as a kid. I hope more and more kids in the future will be given a chance to cherish Precure and other shows like it. He's my Pop-Tart buddy. You know, I actually like these a lot more than I remembered. I'm gonna be real. I kind of remember hating Pop-Tarts as a kid, but I think it's because my mom always bought, the worst flavors. I do, understand why they chose strawberry specifically. This video was a huge undertaking and learning experience for me, so I want to thank everyone that helped make it possible. Like Toad the Cat. Thank you to William Winkler. He has been publishing books recently if you want to support his current work, though I will note many of them are for more mature audiences. Thank you to Melissa Flores. She's currently working as a comic book writer. She's worked on a lot of Power Rangers comics, and she also has an original series called The Dead Lucky. She also sent me a kind of ridiculous gift. So I lied when I said there's no official Glitter Force merch, because there is, and it's this. They originally gave these out to the employees that worked at Saban, and she sent me a couple of them, so I might be one of the first people outside of the company that get to touch these, and it's just really surreal having something like this in my house. I'm still trying to figure out what I plan on doing with all of these, because I have about 5 in total. So stay tuned, potential giveaway, potentially not, no promises because I've never done a giveaway before and I don't really know how to go about that. Thank you to Precure Italia for letting me use a video they filmed and also just being a really good information resource. They've been Italy's #1 fan site since 2006, and they're basically the Italian fandom's Library of Alexandria. I also want to give a shout out to Giorgia and Elisa Alessandri. They sung much of the music for Precure's Italian dubs. And they started touring conventions in 2025. If you're in Italy, go see one of their shows, and if not, you could follow them on Instagram to see clips. I'd still recommend following them even if you're an international fan. Also, thank you to my friend Los Monos Bebe Leche for translating our correspondence. Thank you to AJ Velasco. I hope I could see you at Toy Fair again this year. This is going to be really cutting it close, so you're probably not going to have a chance to watch it before I see you, but we tried. Also, thank you to my friend Ness for dragging your CRT outside for me. And thank you to a bunch of other friends. Even if you didn't really help directly on this video, your support as a fellow Glitter Force warrior has been invaluable throughout the years. Shoutouts to Magical Starlight, Cure Loopy, Ours, the Daft Brothers, the Cure Aqua Fun Club, and probably a ton more people I can't think of right now. Now, if you excuse me, I gotta pull an all-nighter for Toy Fair prep.